Welcome to another live painting with Paige. I appreciate you being here. Tonight we're actually going to paint a little buck, this deer over here, and I hope that you are ready to have some fun with me. First and foremost, if you want to paint along with me, go ahead into the description below and you're going to want to download a couple of items. Let's see. You're going to want to download the sketch. Here you can either trace or transfer the sketch, and you're also going to want to download, you're going to want to download your reference image that is down there too, and it looks a little something like this. So while you're doing that, I have a little bit of housekeeping to do tonight. If you're here in chat, say hello. I love it, Laurel. Your sketch looks like a lunatic mouse or moose. That's funny. I'm sure it looks great. So let me know you're here in the chat or comments below. Let's see. What else do I need to tell you? So this painting session should probably take about an hour. It could take a little bit more, so be prepared for that. Also, we really want to highlight our local deer around here because Pocatello is really lucky to have wildlife here that we get to see often. And this particular guy, he was in the backyard of my in-laws. They regularly visit my in-laws, and often they get pears and apples and little treats when they pass through with their little herd. So that's one of the things that makes Pocatello great here, is that we have wildlife and we're really close to wilderness, but we also have a small town community feel. And tonight we're just highlighting that. Let's see, we're going to need to talk about supplies for a minute. So a lot of my students like to know what colors of paint that I'm using. So tonight I should be using raw umber, just a little bit of cobalt teal and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Will be very little. We're going to use neutral tint, which is a sepia or a brown color. And if you have a Van Dyke brown or just regular brown, that's fine. I'm also probably going to use a little yellow ochre, and most definitely will use Sodalite or Payne's Gray. So if you have those colors, great. If you don't, you can improvise. That's just fine too. If this is the first time that you are visiting, welcome. My name is Paige, and I'm the Chief Pixel Pusher and Paintbrusher over at Gumption. And I'm just loving having people come and join me to paint with me. I know being in quarantine has been long, and so hopefully you get a little bit out of this painting class and enjoy it. So without further ado, I think we should get started. If you have any questions or anything while we're painting, go ahead and throw them in the chat in the comments below, and I'll answer them as I see them come through. So first and foremost, this is the kind of paper that I have been using for demos. You can find this in any craft store, and I don't get paid by these people to promote their products, but this is a pretty affordable watercolor paper for you to use. And this is the finished piece that I did from last time. And here's my sketch for this time. So are you guys ready to do some painting? I also have my palette cam over here to help you, and so you can see kind of the ratios of water and paint that I use. I have students who are often really interested in that, and so I'm trying to help with that. Okay. So first I need to get some of my pigment set up here, and I'm going to switch it to the palette cam. I'm going to start with a very light blue. So hopefully you can see that. And I have this awesome little thing, this pipette that you can get water in and put it in your tray, and it saves you a lot of time and helps you not waste paint. And I always forget to use it on these live streams, and I remembered today, so yay. One other side note, you might need a hair dryer. I try to kind of paint in a round robin sort of fashion, but sometimes you have to, and if you paint kind of in a round robin, and I'll show you what that means here, you kind of don't need a hairdryer. So you see I'm really diluting this blue a little bit. We have a lot of cools and some warm tones here, but I don't want to make this overpowering. So we'll switch to this cam. Now, if you're having trouble transferring your drawing, you can see here's my sketch. I just took a pencil to the back side of it and traced it over my paper. So if you're struggling at all, that's a good way to go. And I'm going to test out this blue to see just how blue it is. So that's pretty good. That's pretty light. And I often use my iPad so I can see the imagery. Oops, now it boosted me out of there. Let's see. Bear with me here. Maybe it's going to work. Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, where are you, little dear? Oh, there you are. Okay. Not that one, not that one. I'm sorry, guys. It kicked me out of my photo, and so I'm looking at this photo, and one thing that I like to do is kind of just look at the image and see what's kind of warm, where we're moving into some cooler tones, and where we have some grays, and where I might see kind of blues and that sort of thing. So we'll start with this blue. I'm going to use my painting as kind of a guide as well. And I have this really nice kind of pretty good size 8 brush. And I'm just putting some of this real light blue in some of these areas where I know it's kind of some bluish tones. I'm going to do it in the eye. I'm going to try to preserve and reserve a little bit of the blue in the eye. I might throw some Cobalt Teal in here too, but just going through with my color here. And this is pretty diluted down. I always get these little hairs in my brush. And the antlers are so interesting to really look at. They have a lot of texture and are really full of different colors. So I'm making them, you can't quite see that, scooch that over a little bit. So I'm just adding that blue into these grayer parts. And maybe along here. This guy's got quite a bit of blue in him. And you can see this is really light. Typically, watercolor dries lighter than it looks when you lay it down at first. I use core watercolors. The majority of the colors that I'm using right now are core, so sometimes they are a little bit, they stay vibrant. So you gotta, if you have to layer, you have to layer. So you can see in the muzzle here, I see a little bit of blue, and I'm just putting a little bit of that in there. To get that going. And now I need to go into his other side of his antlers. These can all be blue. This brush is really nice because it's kind of pointy. So you can get into some of those tight spaces there. So tonight we'll be doing some layering and probably less wet and wet and just kind of layering it. Okay. So he's starting to kind of come alive here. We're going to have to switch to our palette cam here because I'm going to mix some brown. And first I'm going to use raw umber. And this is this kind of color. So it's kind of a warm tan color. I might need to use this a little bit. Hopefully that'll focus in there. There we go. And this is going to be kind of an undercoat, an under base for this guy. And switch to the overhead. So let's see. I'm going to start over on this side. Kind of blend it into the blue here by the ear. And around the eye a little. And down the side. And in the face here. Underneath the eye. Just moving that kind of bead there. I'm going to get him up here on his nose too. Just kind of, I need to get a little more pigment here. Just kind of getting him. I'm even going to go in here. Throughout the rest of his body here. And then I'm going to get him over on the side here and around this other eye. So I'm going to let that dry for now. We'll move on to a different area and probably a different color here. I think we'll go to our neutral tint. So we'll switch over to this camera, and my neutral tint is this kind of deep, cool brown color. Not all neutral tints are this kind of brown. So if you have neutral tint, it could be a little bit different than mine. Oops. I'm going to mix some of this up. Now I just put my finger accidentally into my painting here, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I just dipped my brush in some water. I'm going to try to smooth that out a little. It's not a make or break, but in case that happens to you, what happens is it lifts a little bit of color. Maybe I can throw some color in here. Okay, well, we'll leave that there for now. Okay, so I'm going to test this to see what kind of consistency this brown is. So it's pretty light. I may want to put a little more pigment into my water here. Okay. It's still kind of light, but that's probably okay. We can layer it if we need to. Okay. And I'm gonna switch out brushes here. I'm not sure what size this one is, but I'm guessing maybe a 4 or a 5 here. And I'm going to dip it in my neutral tint, kind of tap it off a little bit, and paint along this antler here. Moving kind of slow today. Don't know what's up. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, this whole area actually is brown here. So my paint is pretty wet, so I'm probably gonna have to go in for another, let this dry and go in again. Try to get all of him here. And this goes actually into his eye area. So we'll try to paint around the eye. And it's kind of good that this is light because it allows us a base that we can work with as we work on the eye a little bit more. So I'll bring it around the other eye and then into this antler here. I can't wait for our zoo here to locally to open up. They have all these animals that are native to Idaho. And being cooped up in this quarantine, I just can't wait until I can go take some photographs of some animals. I take a lot of photos, so I have imagery for paintings. Okay, and I think we can put a little brown on the ears here. Let's see, got my hands full here. We'll see how this works. I have this new kind of palette set up, and I often drip all over my paper. We'll see how this how it works. If I can keep from doing that. So I'm going to put in a layer here for the ear. They're pretty close. I think I got my drawing a little off kilter here, but that is okay. I'm just going to go along the top of the ear here and actually just pull in a little bit of this raw umber for the side of the ear here. When I look at this image, what I see a lot of is gray in the ears, so we'll do more gray in the ears. But I keep putting my finger down here. Just gonna draw that out there. And then this guy back here could have a little bit of brown. He's kind of got some shadow going on here. So I'll add a little bit there. And I've still got some wet stuff here. But I think I can move along the side of that guy to do his back area here. So I'm going to dip into my brown color. I'm going to try not to touch, well, that didn't work. I was going to try not to touch this raw umber here that's still wet, but that's okay. Actually, let's see. So we can see some darker shadows in some of these areas. Might drop a little more pigment here. When I did this guy, I did a few layers of this part. We'll see if it behaves. Then what I do is I put my brush in clean water and I kind of soften these edges a little to kind of preserve some of this light. Sometimes you gotta tap your brush a little bit. And we can go in, I'm gonna move this to the center area here, because he has a little bit of dark here. You're always kind of checking your reference. I feel like this is a little too wet here. Watercolor is just kind of a ratio of paint versus water and how you handle it oftentimes. It can be temperamental. Whoops, hit the mic. So another area I see that I forgot to touch is the nose. So I'm going to take a smaller brush here. This could be maybe a 2, I'm guessing. And I'm just going to do a light wash over the nose area. We're going to get darker and we're going to do more here, but to start off with, it helps to be able to preserve some of the light areas if you want to. I always see other things that I can change, so if you preserve some of the lightness, you can keep working it. Okay. How are you guys doing out there? Laurel, is your moose turning into a deer? Now, I will say I love these little brushes. They can really allow you to do a lot. And I'll be using them a lot tonight in the eyes and different areas. So, okay. So now we need to mix up some gray or some sodalite. And so we're going to go back to our palette cam here. And this sodalite color is a Daniel Smith color. It really looks a lot like Payne's Gray, which I often use a lot of. But what's great about it is it really granulates nicely. Now I'm not using my pipette just yet for this because I want to really have a good pigment ratio. I think my brown was a little too wet. And so let's test it here. Yeah, that's a nice consistency for paint. Okay. So let's see. And this might be a good place to do a little wet and wet. I know the area that I'm going to put this darker gray, so I can wet it with my brush and then drop it in. And you get this great granulation. Can you see that going? See if we can zoom in a little. And it just kind of creates that texture of the ear a little bit. So sorry to reach across here. I'm going to do that to this other ear too. Just a light layer, not too much water. If you get too much water, you can dab your brush on your napkin. And I'll scoot this over so you can see it a little better and just watch it bloom. And right along the edge here, got a lot of color there. Pretty fun, huh? Still a moose. Okay, well, hey, if it's a moose, it's a moose. It's fine. We have moose here in Pocatello too, and so do you over there, so that works just fine. Okay, so now we're gonna let some of this dry, and I'm gonna move to the eyes, I think. The most fun out of all of these painting techniques. And so I need a tiny brush for this, or a small brush for this. I think I'm going to use this one. It's pretty small. This one is a 0. Okay. Let's see. So I used Sodalite on the eyes. I also used a little bit of Cobalt Teal. And that is where this Cobalt Teal will come in. But I'm going to preserve this area here and this area here, hopefully. Sometimes things go awry and we work with them. So this inner part, so there are a lot of layers to eyes, lids and structure underneath the eye. Always have to remember that the eye is round, of course, so it often gets treated kind of like a sphere as far as shading goes. Okay, I'm going to go around this edge, still preserving a little bit there, so I can drop in my cobalt blue. And I'm looking at my painting and my picture. There's a lot of dark in the eyeball right here. And I'm going to kind of accentuate. There's this lid. It's pretty dark in the photo. Whoops. And underneath. So I might need a little more pigment here. I'm just gonna paint this area in here. And in some areas it's darker than others. We're just kind of trying to get the shape in here right now. Okay. Looking good. How are your guys' eyeballs going? So I sit and really look at these pictures and look at where is it darkest, where is it lighter. It's darker here. It's lighter under here. You've got some reflected light in there. And sometimes if you're having trouble painting or drawing, just sit and really look at it. And you know, they say draw what you see. which sometimes is easier said than done. But so I'm going to go in back into the nose area while our eyes are drying, because we'll go back into those guys. So he's got this a little, that's where his mouth is here. And he's got a little dark here underneath. And he's definitely got some darker areas around the nostrils. And you can use your sodalite here, or you can use more of your brown. I'm just defining my nostrils here. I am actually going to go back in with brown, I think, too. This helps kind of start making him look alive. Okay. Oh, I missed an ear, didn't I? Well, that's okay. We'll go back to that ear. So he has some little markings here. And okay. I'm going to grab a bigger brush. And I think I can darken some of the areas on his nose too. Kind of flopping around here, but. And sometimes I try to leave some of the lighter areas. I'm not always a fan of Misket or masking fluid, and so sometimes I try to preserve my light areas. You don't have to do that. You can use Misket if you like. I think it's just messy. So sometimes I try to preserve it. Or you can use a white paint, which tonight I will show you the kind of gouache that I use, and we'll be doing some highlights with gouache or white. It's more of a white opaque paint. You can also use a gel pen as well. So I'm doing a little bit of wet and wet here. And it's kind of spreading nicely here. Go down here and make this a little bit darker. Oops. And this area is still pretty dark too. I might just add a little extra dollop there. I couldn't get this drawing much bigger than this, or it would not fit on my page. So hopefully you're not struggling too much with the size. Now I'm going to go in with some of this neutral tint brown. You can see in my palette I've kind of moved it to this area that has less water in it, so I have a better pigment load. I'm going to go right in there with this other paint. So neutral tint and a little bit of this sodalite color. Now he's got a brown patch up here. And I feel like I need to kind of go around here. It's gonna bleed into there, but that's okay for now. Okay. So let's hit, okay, I'm gonna go into this ear now, and it's pretty gray. So I'm going to use a little bit of this sodalite color. How are you guys doing? Hopefully you're hanging in there and having a good time. I'm gonna bring maybe a little bit of this brown in here. And I might lift a little bit here. This area is pretty dark, but just kind of soften that edge a little. Draw this in a little bit. Okay. So I think we can add some more form shadows to this guy. I'm going to hit my raw umber again because you can see this area here is darker, and then this side of the face we've got more light hitting this area, and you've got some light hitting here. So I'm just taking what I had for my raw umber, and this is probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 brush, round brush. Just taking that bead and I'm gonna draw it down. I need a little more paint here. And take that bead down below. You could even draw it up here, just along that area, and underneath his chin area. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of go along the nose here. And a little into this area. Warm that up there. He also has the shadow that goes in here underneath the eye. Just kind of paint that in. Tap my brush and get a little of the pigment off and kind of soften these edges. Actually, and this could even go a little bit over there. Maybe a little more around this eye area. And up. Around the eye. Kind of getting this area here. And I think he could use just a little under here. What's interesting about doing this kind of more than once, you see different things at different times when you're painting. I'm going to add a little bit more here. Okay. Starting to look good. I think we could even go in and darken some of these areas along his back and up here in his head area. And we'll do that. Shoulder here. Just have fun with it. Watercolor is always kind of tricky, or it feels tricky when you're starting out because it's less predictable than other paints. I see this kind of goes down this way. So we'll get that area. He's got a little bit of a Adam's apple or something with his fur there. You could even go in on the side here. Let's see, we've got some fur along the ears that we can kind of highlight there. And I think I could even, his neck area, go along this side. And then maybe try to soften these edges, so just a little bit. This neutral tint is a little bit harder for me than other pigments, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's more staining. Okay. Now we'll go back into the top part of his head here. That's pretty dark. And I'm going to go in around the antlers here. Keep it in my hand in my painting. What's nice about doing this layering technique is I can leave an area untouched and it can be lighter, but it isn't white. So you can see this area here that I'm working on preserving. Go around this antler. Just kind of look at that negative space there. Kind of drop in a little more pigment here. And kind of soften this edge so it gently moves into that lighter. You can also lift if you want to, and how you lift is you clean out your brush generally with clean water, tap it on your napkin, and then lift. And you can also tap this with your paper towel to lift as well. Okay. It's coming alive, guys, coming alive. And feel free to pop in any questions that you might have. Oops. I'm gonna dip into this cobalt blue. And I have this really teeny tiny brush. This is a 20. Let's see if you can see that. Maybe you can see that. And I'm going to go into the side of his eye here with this cobalt teal. And I'm going to do it over here too. It's just kind of my thing. I like to give the eyes a little bit of dimension. And on my other painting, it looks like I felt like I saw there was a little bit of blue down here. So you see it's real subtle but kind of fun. And now I can go back in to these eyes with a little bit of darker soda light and do some defining, like eyelashes. Might need a little bit more pigment. I'm going to go around this part of the inner eye because it's pretty dark here too. And define this kind of lid area. It's pretty dark on this side and underneath. There we go. And sometimes I have to do a couple layers of the dark to get it in there. And I'm going to make this white part just a little bit smaller. I'm going to go underneath the eye because you can see there's a bit of his eyelid there. There's a rim. So we want that to come across. I'm going to mix a little bit of the soda light with this brown color. Okay, very good. With these little brushes, you can make these tiny marks. So this looks like fur here. Let's see if I can bring it in a little closer. And you probably don't have a tiny brush at this point, and that's okay. Do what you can do. But you can kind of see the benefit here of a little brush. You can add some texture in there. Almost like stippling a little bit. Okay. So let's get into the antlers a little bit. And feel free to pop any questions that you might have down below. I guess I need to zoom out here. And I could continue working on this forever. I can work it to death. So we'll try to keep it, keep you from getting bored there. But so I'm taking a darker color. I'm doing another layer of this brown color or my neutral tint here. I feel like I don't have enough pigment in here today. What's going on? And these, their antlers are so interesting, so knobby and full of texture. So you could even stipple around here at the base because they're just so textured. So I'm kind of doing an uneven line here with my brown paint because this guy has some texture in between, some lighter colors in between his antlers. We'll kind of move around in this area because it curves just the hair. And I've got some browns up here. We're going to be using a lot of sodalite and in this area because it's really gray in that area. A little more brown back here. And probably a warm tone, a warmer brown along this part here. So you can really use any of your colors that you've been using here in these, but really look at your image. I'm going to soften this edge, or try to maybe. I should have told you that one of the requirements for class was a little teeny tiny brush. They really are helpful. I'm going to get this corner area painted out too. I'm going to do this other antler on the other side. And I've painted in this whole area, so I can always go back with white paint if I want, or I can just leave it kind of mottled here. These are nubby, so another kind of wavy line here. And this one's a little bit, has more dark in it. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of dark here on the ear. So you're really just hunting for light and shadows oftentimes when you're doing these. I'm actually going to use a little gray in this area because this comes down. And so while these antlers are drying, I'm going to kind of go back in here, the light sodalite, just kind of tapping in the ear here to give it texture. And darken up some of these areas that need more defining. Softening out this part of the ear. Darkening this top part of this ear with a sodalite color. it's not looking too bad here. I see that I can bring this up a little. So I dipped into my raw umber there a little bit. And kind of add some texture there. It's a little darker than I want, so just tap it with a little water and lift a little my brush. Oops, paper towel. Okay, so now we're gonna hit the antlers again. I kind of round robin all around. So the antlers, I feel in the back are a little bit more gray colored, so I'm kind of looking to see where the light hits the antler. So I see like it's lighter on this side, and it's kind of, this one's more centered. Oops, would be more centered there. Just bring that down in here. Kind of go around the edge. So really when you're painting, you're kind of just breaking down each shape, looking at the light and the dark of it. I'm going to soften this edge just a hair. And what will happen is I'll go in with a little more detail with a smaller brush. So we're kind of doing the footwork here, and then so spots that I may have missed, I'll go in and fix. Tip, this guy, this tip is dark, and then kind of this texture that goes down here. I appreciate you hanging in there with me on this Thursday night. Okay. Gonna work this guy kind of down directly into where this crevice is there. Soften the edge. Hopefully you can see that. My hand's not too in the way. So I lost a little bit of my darkness, but what I can do is hit my brush in some more pigment and draw it up there. I see I can bring this out a little bit more. I think I spent the most time probably on the antlers and the nose area on this when I did it the first time. The antlers are just fun to paint. And I'm going to move to a smaller brush. And this one might be a little bit longer bristles. This is a golden Taklon brush, 5/0. I'm not sure how you say that, but. So this is where I can kind of get a little more fine lining going on, and we can get some of the texture that is in the antler. So along here, I can define this edge a little bit better. can put in some of these lines if I want to. Wiggle that a little. Sometimes you need to kind of go in and reinforce. Like this is an area that's kind of lost its shape. Maybe it never had shape, but now it will have a little bit more. This guy still needs to be darker back here, and I'm going to define him a little bit more. So I'm going to put some more brown in him because he's darker than everybody in front of him. You can see where I've dripped on my page here a little bit. Well, I'm going to add a little soda light for good measure to that brown paint. Because it granulates so nicely, maybe it will create some texture in there. Thanks, Laurel. I just saw your comment there. That was really sweet of you. It's lots of practice. And, you know, not everybody has these little brushes that I always feel like they're sort of the icing on the cake. One thing about watercolor that I would say, for a lot of years I used student grade brushes and still have some student grade brushes and use them on occasion. They're synthetic, and I actually pretty much used synthetic brushes. But a lot of times brushes can make a huge difference in how your picture comes out. Like you can see, because I'm able to define this line a little bit more with a little bit of a smaller brush, it really helps, right? Or at least that's how I feel about it. It helps me a little bit. And, you know, sometimes when you are starting in watercolor, you might have just a couple brushes, and that's fine when you start out, but sometimes it can make all the difference. Paper is the same kind of a thing. It can make all the difference in the world as to how things turn out for you. So if you find that you struggle, don't give up on yourself, please. It really is a process, and sometimes it's your tools that really need help, and paper is usually the big culprit. And it doesn't cost too much to get a little bit better or more appropriate paper for what you're doing. And if you don't like one paper, chuck it and get a better paper. We have Hobby Lobby here, and that's about the only thing that we have for supplies here in town, or else we'd have to travel an hour to go somewhere else. And they have quite a selection of papers, but I have gotten some papers that I didn't really love there that were brands that I like. And so sometimes you have to test run paper and see what you like. I think, you know, 100% cotton is always going to be your better bet, but like for demos like this Canson XL works really nicely. It still spreads pretty nicely and has a texture if you're looking for texture on your paper. There are two kinds of watercolor paper. There's hot press watercolor paper, and there's also cold press, and cold press has more texture, and you can kind of see the grooves in the paper. Hot press is flat, and they kind of give different results, but if you have 100% cotton paper, you definitely will notice an improvement in your paintings. It won't ball up on you. You can kind of work the paper a little bit more. So if you're discouraged with watercolor, don't give up on yourself, or let your buddy give up on themselves. Sometimes it just takes different supplies. I really struggled with watercolor when I first started. I took it as my first painting class, which might have been not the smartest move, because it's really one of the harder mediums sometimes to learn, because it's not forgiving. And so I struggled in that class, and I just thought, I'm just not good at this. I can't do it. But I figured out my own way to use the medium, and you learn the rules, and then you learn how to bend the rules so you can make it work for you. So I'm showing you how I do it, and then you'll find your own way probably to do it. So I'm warming up this side of this antler just a little bit with a little bit of this raw umber. And I'm still moving into the sodalite and using it, softening the edges here. Okay. So we're a little over an hour. I hope that's all right with you guys. Finish out these antlers here, maybe a couple more details, and then I'll let you go. I figured because of these antlers it might take just a little bit longer. You can see that this is an extension of this antler in the back here. So I need to make sure I can create an edge there that shows it is different. If you want to take other classes with me, I have some other tutorials on this channel that are just, you can kind of do them at your own pace. They are not necessarily live, although my past live classes are up, and I've tried to edit some of those where the sound has sort of failed. I've done some voiceover work if you are interested in checking out other videos too. See how nice this is to have this little brush? I don't know if you can see it, but you can really get in some fine line work if you have a steady hand, which I don't always. But you can really, because these antlers have so much texture, you can go back in to your sodalite over other areas that have dried and kind of create some textures. Clean up some edges if you need to. Here's an edge. This one could use a little bit of magic here. So you can keep running color through these antlers. We could even make these a little bit darker. But let's move to the nose to finish off the nose area. I wonder, is that better zoomed in? Maybe that might be better. Okay, so I'm looking at this guy's nose. It's really dark here, and we've gotten that, except for I kind of lost it over here. So I'm going to take one of my little brushes. This is a size 0. This is actually a flat brush, but it's so tiny that you can't. Oh, it's just gonna keep dinging. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna go into my neutral tint. I kind of wind up calling it Nutri-Tint. It's neutral tint. Don't let me slack off, guys. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and define this area here a little bit better. And it really does come up all the way here. I'm going to do a little bit of this outer edge. And then he's got some dark areas that I forgot to add in, so we're going to do that now. He's got this little texture around his nose. And right here. And you can just kind of draw it in there with your brush. He's got some lines here. Oop, I might have done that in the wrong spot. Oh well, that's okay. You could even go so far as to darken this area here. And on this side of this nostril. These are the things that I just love, these little detail things here. Where else? So he's got some dark around his eyes. I'm totally skipping out on some of this stuff. So I'm going to draw a line here to better define this eye area. And I'm going to go around because it's a little bit darker on this side of the eyeball. I'm going to get a little water in there to lighten it up. And then we're going to shade this part because you know I was talking about how the eye is round. So light hits round objects a little differently. So there's a little form shadow here. And then this is a little bit lighter here. And I'm gonna go into my raw umber here because I see this lid sort of extends here. I may have to go back in to that a little bit once it dries. And I'm also going to kind of darken, there's this ridge of his nose here. So we're gonna separate that out. And then there's some brown underneath his eye. So he needed a little help on this side. And we can't leave that out. So look at your reference image and just kind of compare what's missing where. Because there's always stuff that I see later. I'm working in one area. There we go. And I was feeling like this eye is a little bit small. So I'm just slightly making it a little bigger, I think. And a lot of that is due to this brown that's around the eye. I'm going to dip into my paint here and just get a little bit more paint. And if you can see that in my palette here, it's pretty concentrated. It's not dark enough, not dark enough. We'll go into the soda light. This will solve this problem maybe. So really when you're painting or you're drawing, really look at what's light and what's dark and really just sit and observe that. It will make your work better. And we maybe on this channel will talk about chiaroscuro, which is shaping with value instead of line drawings. And once you kind of learn how to use that method, I mean, it exponentially improves your drawing ability. At least it did for me. There was a big difference in what I could see in my own work. So I'm just kind of skipping around here, fixing some of these areas that I see that just need a little more definition or are a little darker. think he looks kind of like a little buck. There might be some areas here that I want to add. See if I can add a little warmth too. So this is kind of warm around here. This area might be a little warm. He's got this kind of area underneath his eye. Skipping around his eyelid here. You can see like little things like this kind of help really bring things together. I'm going to bring you out here. I'm going to zoom out a little. So if you have any questions for me, now would be a good time to pop them in the chat below. If you have questions about why I might do something a certain way or why I'm using a certain product or brush. I get most of my brushes these days through Teal brushes, and I get a little bit of a kickback if anybody purchases brushes through them, but it doesn't cost you any more. But I support them because I discovered them in a kind of one of those art boxes that you get lots of different supplies in, and I just really liked this specific brush for watercolor. And so I've been a fan pretty much ever since, and what I love about them is they are artist run, and they really support artists. They're a small business. I can't imagine how they're doing during this kind of time frame with the quarantine, but they still seem to be working, so that's always good. Hopefully you are surviving the quarantine and not too miserable. Okay, so sometimes what I like to do is I have this favorite color. My students know all about it because I talk about it all the time. And it is basically a hot pink. So it's opera pink. And my favorite thing when doing watercolor is introducing a color very subtly, if need be, that you don't expect to be there. So you can kind of see this hot pink color. I'm going to work my hot pink a little bit into my buck here. So when I look at my picture, I have some warm areas. Let's see, maybe I'm going to zoom this in. Okay. So I have some warm areas where I see there's some warmth, and this was kind of towards the end of the day. So I have a little pink here and a little pink here. Sometimes I just add it wherever I feel like it. There's some warmth here. So I'm going to add that for giggles. And got to keep using my reference here. So it might look like a lot right now, but I'm going to kind of blend it out. And honestly, if I weren't live, I would just keep working these antlers to death. So, but the thing about painting is you should be having fun. So if you have favorite colors that you like to use, well, use them. And anything that makes your painting experience a little bit more fun, kind of like your little secret, you like to add certain colors, or you like to paint a certain subject matter. I also love this pink is called opera pink, and it mixes really well with a medium yellow too. Kind of makes this really electric kind of orange color. So I use like a little bit of a warmer yellow with it. And maybe add a little bit here. What do you think? You think we're done? We could keep working this, but I'm sure. Okay, hopefully you're getting some video here. I know it's a little choppy. And yeah, so if you have any questions, I think we're probably at a point here where I'm going to touch on a couple things and then let you go. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. If you want to continue with this tutorial later on, I would say wait until it goes live again. Generally, it's like an hour, I think. And then this video will be up in my live playlist, so you're welcome to access it anytime that you like. One of the things that I would like to do at the end of my stream is thank my Patreon subscribers. And, oh, there's my little deer. And a big thanks to Colin Jackson for being one of my one and only Patreon supporter at the moment. I appreciate your support, and it helps me do what I do here for you guys. And I get to do what I love, so that's awesome, right? Thanks for tuning in. I will do another live stream next Thursday. I haven't quite decided what it's going to be yet, but I'm always open to suggestions too. Tune in again with me, and I just want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It makes it really fun for me. And so I hope you got something out of tonight's live stream. And if you think of any questions that come up for you, go ahead and hit me up and let me know. I'm always happy to answer those questions for you. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to find me on the interweb, you can find me at these locations. And I'm always posting different artwork. It's not just watercolor. And I plan on doing some other kind of tutorials here that are not just watercolor too. So again, I'm open to suggestion there too. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. I'd love to see your pictures. So if you are so kind to send them to me, I'm open to, I won't share them anywhere. I just like seeing them and see how you did. So yeah, cool. So thanks. Have a great rest of your evening. Keep painting, keep being creative, and I will see you next week.